I will call this regular meeting of council to order, and I will ask staff to hook us up for.
This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, that could be a Freudian slip, I'm not sure.
Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north, strong and free. From far and wide, oh Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. Oh Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Okay. So everybody would just remain on their feet if you're able, just to observe a moment of quiet contemplation. That's great, thank you. I always love that last scene in "Oh Canada" anthem, where the guy is skating across the glass-like lake. It gives somebody with a small rake in their backyard great envy, but it's a beautiful scene. Would somebody be so kind as to make a motion to approve the agenda in your package? Thank you very much, David, and thank you, Pat, for seconding that. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. And Pat's got her signed too. Great. Are there any disclosures of interest based on the material you've read and reviewed in your package? A declaration, Councilor Spola, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The minutes for February the 8th, I have a conflict. I live next to this project.
Appreciate that. My understanding in the chair is that if there are minutes that have already been gone through, and then you do not have to declare on minutes, because those decisions and discussions have already taken place. But thank you for that. No presentations per se, but we do have a deputation, and I would like to welcome and thank Sergeant Matt Stoner and Inspector Veronica Eaton, our detachment commander, from our policing agency, the Orillia OPP, here to discuss the Community Mobilization Unit, or Community Mobilization Table. And with that being said, there they are. Welcome to the virtual hood. And I appreciate this. I'll save some of my comments for the end, but it is a meaningful presentation that you're doing today. It's much appreciated around this council table and amongst the staff. And I also reached out to the Downtown Management Board to have them encourage as many people in the core of the city and beyond, for that matter, if anybody wishes to observe today. So thank you very much, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So thank you, everybody, for allowing us to come and do a presentation for our community mobilization unit. Sergeant Matt Stoner is the sergeant who leads this team. So far, he's done some great work, and I will turn it over to him, and he'll do a little introduction about himself so you know who he is, and then he'll get right into the presentation. So thank you.
Your Worship and Council, my name is Sergeant Matt Stoner. I've been with the OPP for 22 years. I started my career in Peterborough. I went into Central Region Criminal Investigations. Then I went to City of Kawartha Lakes Detachment, which is Lindsay. From there, I went to Halliburton. I spent some time in Investigation Support Bureau, came to Orillia Detachment, and then I departed rather quickly on the inspector to go to an international policing mission in Ukraine for 1 year, and then I returned last April back to Orillia Detachment. So I bring some of those experiences to this unit, and I have used this type of framework in the past in Kawartha Lakes and Halliburton with some success. So I'll start, this will be on the Orillia Community Mobilization Unit, and if I can have the next slide, please. So just as an introduction, last summer when I returned, there were some conversations with the downtown urban management team. There was a perception and a need for officers to be dedicated to community issues. Myself and then Acting Sergeant Andrew McDonald ran some analytics that supported the need for a community mobilization unit to be created and identify ways that we could educate, engage, and conduct enforcement on those community issues. Our first project was around the downtown core as we had the analytics. And bear with us here, I think our power went out and our generator should be kicking in. So hopefully there was no interruption. So the trial run is on the downtown strategy, which I'll talk about later on, and it is still currently operating. Next slide, please. So this is one of the things that I taught overseas, and this is something that as a criminal investigator, I take to heart, that the test of police efficiency is the absence of crime and disorder, not the visible evidence of police action in dealing with it. And that's rings true today, even though Sir Robert Peel said that in 1829. So I like bringing that up and giving that back to the communities. So next slide, please. So I guess everybody should be familiar with the Ontario Mobilization and Engagement model of community policing. There are 4 quadrants, they're color-coded. It focuses around education, engagement, and enforcement, the 3 E's, which this team will be working around. This is where the community and the police cooperate all throughout the model. So it's all of us working together for solutions towards our problems. The community mobilization unit is structured that we will identify which quadrant we're in based on the problem, the analytics, and the issues, and we will formulate plans to combat those issues. Next slide, please. So I don't know how much you guys can see of these pictures, but if you need, I have the pictures saved and I can send them to somebody in a better format. So this slide here just shows the kind of a summary of what each quadrant is about. Green is where we all want to be. Blue is where we want to be, but green is where we support public safety, education, we liaise with the community, and we promote situational crime prevention measures. Red, we analyze crime, we target enforcement, and we initiate problem solving with community partners. When we move out of the enforcement, we get back into the yellow. That's where we identify risks and social disorder. We'll connect community agencies, and we support intervention activities. Blue is where we want to be. We want to keep engagement with local leaders, support of the community-led initiatives, and we want to promote community safety activities to keep us in that blue quadrant. Next slide, please. So the purpose of the community mobilization unit, and one thing I forgot to mention earlier, is that this team is dedicated to all the communities within the detachment area. So our purpose is, as a dedicated team, to focus on community issues with the goal of developing strategies to connect community partners, promote community safety activities, and reduce calls for service. So our main goal is to reduce recidivist crimes or reoccurrence of certain activities to free up our officers on the front line to conduct more patrols in their areas or to do more thorough investigations. Next slide, please. So currently the situation, Social, economical, addiction, and mental health occurrences are resource intensive and can be reoccurring if the root cause is not identified and proper supports engaged. So the community mobilization unit will be utilized to get to those root causes to help get people into the supports they need to prevent criminal activity or recidivist crime. Also post-investigation to get the people to support so that we don't have recidivist crime or recurring incidents. The team will identify these community issues through analytical information, develop proactive methods of engagement, education, and enforcement. So we're going to bring it all together. And through that, by bringing it all together, we're going to draft strategies in order to prevent these types of occurrences or to stem those community issues. So currently we have the downtown patrol strategy, which encompasses foot patrol, business engagement, and we have been working with the downtown urban management, I believe that's the name of it. We've been working with them to enhance this strategy. This is the thing that set the team up. We also have a crisis outreach and support team, also known as COAST, using the acronym. They are heading up the social, economical, addiction, and mental health occurrences. We've had, since getting that up and running again last summer with Officer Kitchen, most of you will know, we've had over 1,000, I'll call them interventions for lack of a better term, but to get people into support to prevent them from falling back into criminal occurrences. One of the main strategies we're working on right now is a loss prevention strategy for local businesses. A lot of the issues of theft from these businesses cause us a lot of investigation, a lot of follow-up due to evidence not being readily available statements. We're going to work with the community, work with the businesses to ensure that it's more of a streamlined approach, get these types of investigations complete in a timely manner before the courts and make sure that the courts are able to prosecute them. Next slide, please. So this is our mission. It's to develop strategies of identified high crime and traffic areas and engage, educate, and enforce with the objective of community safety. The goal of this team is to promote public safety and reduce crime and traffic-related incidents within the Orillia detachment area. So that encompasses all of our townships as well. Next slide. So the three phases that we're using to create the strategies and to create the team. So this is an overarching plan for the team, but we also use these three phases for our planning process. So phase one is our analytics and planning phase. Phase two, the education, engagement, enforcement phase. And three, consolidation and reinvestment. So at the same time we're using this to set up the team, the individual team members are using the same phases to design these strategies. Next slide, please. So phase one, our analytics and planning phase. This is where we get our comprehensive analytics. So we take everything from niche RMS and we start plotting it and see where the issues are. So some of these analytics can be word of mouth, perception. So we'll take all of that into account and we identify our key areas and develop strategies. I have a good example coming, but it didn't get here in time. We have a heat map of the detachment area where certain calls for service are, and it shows by color coding the street or the locations based on the calls for service that we've asked for, and the officers now get a visual image of where they should be at a given time. So our team has been pulling off these analytics since last August regarding downtown. We started pulling them off for the loss prevention strategy. We utilize these analytics for our snowmobile strategy, and we're currently designing a strategy for our marine program, which takes this into account. So it's all broken down by geography or calls for service. Then we can request more focused analysis for certain areas and calls depending on how the map reads or the calls read. And this is where we'll use the heat map to develop strategies, which clients are going to be affected by this or that we need to bring to the table. We will acquire and analyze what equipment we need, any partnerships, what our response may look like, and then we will conduct an assessment of the action we're going to take. So for the downtown strategy, we analyze our detachment statistics in line with the perceptions that the community was vocalizing to us. We planned strategic goals, and we started conducting patrols of those areas and working with the community. Next slide, please. So phase 2, education, engagement, enforcement. So this is where we identify courses and training, not only for the officers, but anything for the community or community groups that we could bring to the table that enhances everybody's knowledge of the situation. So some of that right now is we've identified a need for marine operators, ATV operators. We just conducted a human source development workshop for the community mobilization members that was open to detachment members as well, to better enable them to gather information from the community when they're talking to people, how to gather it correctly and how we can use it legally to combat crime. We also identified networks and partnerships to gain access to information and supports, as well as extra training. The community presentations, media releases are going to be a big part of our program. So with the loss prevention strategy, Officer Ken Williams is looking at conducting an online presentation using our Community Safety Services Bureau at headquarters, and making sure that businesses are better educated on the need, the types of evidence and our need for court, and to help streamline these types of occurrences. Media releases to make sure that the community is involved and they're aware of everything that's going on. I think you have probably seen a lot of those lately. Officer Dongelmans has put out quite a few media releases, the Twitter and other videos and the social media stuff. And we start to mold our enforcement strategy if we are at that point. How we're going to combat it, who's going to be partnered with us, whether by law, MTO, other partnerships, other police services, other regional or provincial assets within the OPP. And we start to bring that together and conduct enforcement once we've done the education and engagement. So again, we've identified for the downtown strategy, we identified officer training needs. We've identified some community education needs, and we've have a strategy to bring partners to the table. Sorry, not the downtown strategy, but the loss prevention strategy. And we're doing concurrent enforcement at the same time. So as the calls are coming in, we are still doing the investigations and making sure that people are prosecuted. But we are setting things up to help prevent or streamline those occurrences. And we've accessed provincial and regional support teams for that. Next slide, please. So phase 3 is consolidation and reinvestment. So this is where we start to consolidate our engagement and our statistics. We take the statistics from the beginning and we look at them at the end, and or where we're at the point we're at, and we start to readjust. Do we need more education and enforcement? Do we need more liaising, more supports? And we will reinvest our patrols or our strategy into the identified areas that we may have missed before. And the main thing here is that we look at everything so that we maintain our focus. We don't want to get mission creep and start straying away from our mission and taking on other duties. And next slide, please. So our anticipated results. The members of the community and the OPP will work cooperatively to maintain a safe community. So right now with Coast, we've expanded that to 2 workers through the CMHA. We're now able to conduct more interventions. We have seen our mental health calls since the pandemic have gone up 23%, but we are now reaching out to more people pre-incident, getting them into the supports, plus post-incident, we can get them into the supports so it's not a reoccurrence. One of the, or 6 of the success stories I'll talk about recently is we had 6 individuals in the Orillia area who were turned away from community supports due to behavioral issues or risk factors. and the Coast team was able to find them supports elsewhere to make sure that they didn't fall into a pattern of criminal activity to support themselves. So we headed that off, and the Coast team did an amazing job. So another thing right now is the loss prevention strategy. So Constable Williams is going to be working with retailers to streamline those investigations and gather evidence. This will free up officers from lengthy follow-up, give us more time to be boots on the ground elsewhere. This will ensure that our Crown briefs are submitted to court completely and thoroughly and accurately. And we're also working with the Crown Attorney to highlight that there is community interest with the prosecution of these investigations due to the nature of them and the quantity. And we're setting up the education seminars, as I spoke about. One of the main things in that will be how to report incidents, whether it's online, the 888 number, or 911. There will be a crime prevention portion of it, as well as the evidentiary requirements, and a little bit of a tidbit on CPTED, community policing through environmental design, safeguard, lock it or lose it as well. One of the main things that Ken has been able to do on the loss prevention strategy is touch base with the LCBO, and we now have a streamlined approach to get their video because they have a regional security manager, and it was taking a long time for us to view the video, identify the suspects, and get that video for court. So now we have a process in place where the officers can view the video quickly, send an email, and we'll have the video sent to us. So we're not taking 3 weeks to complete one of these investigations. It'll be more streamlined. With the downtown strategy that's ongoing and evolving, we've had a reduction of 219 calls for service between 2019 and 2020. 118 of those are as a result of the initiative that we started in July 2020. The other amount probably stems from the pandemic. Coast, with CMHA, have assisted persons in need towards support and finding them housing, food, etc., which helps cut down on those calls for service. We've identified the key locations and times for officers to be present, and for the most part, we're getting there daily. I know that it's not every day. We don't want to be too predictable, but our numbers are up. And in the last month, our officers have given CPTED, community policing, or crime prevention through environmental design suggestions to a local business to have a bench removed. And that bench has been removed, which has eliminated the gathering of people and reduced liquor license and trespassing charges and calls to that area. So that's just a little tidbit. Some of the stuff we're doing right now, DARE is virtual. So we're doing it through online resources. We're still reaching out and maintaining those relationships with students and staff. And we're able to educate children on substance abuse and build the trust between the youth of the community and the police. And our snowmobile, ATV, and vessel patrols, as well as foot, bicycle, and motorcycle patrols some are in place and some are being drafted. So we're designing a strategy to incorporate these patrols and enhance our crime and traffic prevention. We're identifying our hotspots so that we can deploy our limited resources to key areas at key times. Plus, where we're not able to, we can support ourselves through our regional and provincial partners and assets. And our officers have also looked at enhancing through our auxiliary program. And some of the stuff that we looked at doing in the last fall, you may have seen it on TV or in the news, but we are trying to enhance our search and rescue capabilities. We were with JRCC, the Joint Rescue out of Trenton, and we did some training with the local fire departments and other police services on the water of Lake Couchiching and Lake Simcoe. And we also had JRCC with the helicopter, so that it better improves our capabilities and interoperability during those types of occurrences. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, our goal is to continually develop and maintain a coordinated detachment and community response to identified community issues. And final slide. Any questions?
That one's pretty self-explanatory, isn't it? This is Sergeant Stoner and Inspector Eaton. particularly on this particular issue, although I'm sure this came to, yep, Jay, I'm going to just make a couple of comments and I'll put you in queue right now. That's great. Thank you. And Ralph, thank you. Anyway, just I don't know you that well, but I will say the last couple of meetings that we've had at the what I'll call the round table, which is an informal thing I put together just to with all the initiatives that you've mentioned, and some I'll reiterate in a few minutes, just to want to make sure that we are dotting our I's and crossing our T's and making sure that we're doing everything we should be doing. And this is a wonderful piece that you bring to the table. But my point is, even though we've had limited interactions, I am grateful for your knowledge, your experience, and the passion that I've seen that you have brought to the table, especially with the community mobilization unit idea. So thank you for that. I love the cooperative setup that this community mobilization unit embraces. You're developing relationships with, I would say, all the stakeholders, the UMB, and well, it depends where you are, because it's not just for the core of the city, quite clearly, but in the core of the city, the downtown, you'll be developing relationships with the Downtown Management Board, potentially with the Chamber of Commerce, with the business operators, and with those folks who come and visit our downtown, mostly for good reasons. But you'll become part of the landscape, and you will better know how to deal with these things. So I'm quite excited by that. I'm just wondering if you'd be so kind as to, I know COAST is an acronym, but if you just maybe just describe what that acronym is that would be terrific.
So COAST is Crisis Outreach and Support Team. So it's Constable Kitchen from the OPP, and right now we have 2 crisis workers through the Canadian Mental Health Association attached to our team. So when Constable Kitchen isn't working, we have 2 other members that support that team, and they do phone calls, they help get people into supports, and they do visits, personal and over the phone.
Thanks very much for that. And yeah, Officer Kitchen, somebody else I have mentioned a number of times, brings that very similar passion and caring to the job. So thank you for that. And just before I go to everybody, so they'll just bear with me for a moment, there are a number of initiatives that are alive and well or underway, or just about to be underway within the core of the city in particular, because that's where I've certainly heard a number of issues expressed. And certainly any urban center has issues. And as you said, Sergeant Stoner, some of those issues have been exacerbated by COVID. Certainly we are down on calls for service, maybe partly due to COVID, but some of those other issues, whether they're addictions and mental health, appear to have been exacerbated, maybe partly because of the pandemic. Certainly one of the fallout pieces from the pandemic is the fact that some of the agencies that deliver some of these linking services that you've alluded to were, I know, in the initial lockdown, I believe subsequently they were pulled off the street, and they were only operating virtually, whereas some of these folks that we need to deal with and help do not have the ability to link up virtually. So getting them back on the street and working with the people one-on-one is very integral to having some success. Foot patrols, you mentioned, and I'm hoping anybody that is within the core of the city has seen an increase in the patrols downtown. That's terrific. The situation table, which is I don't know whether certainly I guess it's related to the community mobilization unit, where they'll take they'll identify issues that have maybe reoccurred a number of times and run a meaningful intervention and linked it to the proper services. That's a great initiative. The one thing I will mention, and I'm hoping there's a number of people from the downtown watching right now, Sergeant Stoner made it very, very clear that they go when and where the data tells them to go. And that data is collected or developed from calls for service. So if you're watching right now and you identify behavior that should not be happening anywhere you are, but certainly in the core of the city, you need to report it. Certainly if it's criminal behavior. And if it's, you can go online and report it. You can call the 888-310-1122 number, or if it's an emergency, certainly 911. But every time you do that, it is a meaningful thing to do because that tells the OPP where and when to deploy resources. And they have limited resources, so that's an important fact. CPTED was mentioned, crime prevention and through environmental design, whether that's moving the bench, as Sergeant Stoner said, trimming branches on a tree, or putting light in an alleyway, putting cameras, and we'll talk more about cameras in a moment. But certainly the CPTED, and that's a service that the OPP offer. So if you know a business operator that is having issues, and I can think of a few examples right now, I would encourage them to call the OPP, and they may very well have a meaningful recommendation that you can make to change that behavior or move that behavior on. Safeguard was also mentioned, basically locking, as an example, lock your vehicle, or you can lose the contents of it. Scram and Christine Preston and Lee Kenderdine are putting a lot of work into a report that will come to the PSB shortly, and I assume to council shortly after, even if it's an FYI piece, because council approved $100,000 for infrastructure for security cameras in the core of the city. And that program is about to launch. And the SCRAM stands for, and Christine is going to be, she's not here, so she can't get too upset if I forget it, but it's Security Camera Resource and Mapping. Wow, I think I got it. And that's another partnership with the OPP. We are going to encourage and incent people to put exterior cameras on their buildings, their businesses, or their homes, and then register their coordinates with the city or the OPP. And if there's an issue in that area, first of all, a number of cameras hopefully will be a deterrent to certain types of behavior. But if there is an incident and Sergeant Stoner or somebody on his team needs to investigate, they will have coordinates that they can get, people's names they can get a hold of and go and access the footage in that camera system. So that's coming up, and that should be launched this spring. And the last thing, as I mentioned earlier, I put a roundtable together, and the OPP have been great. They've taken that very seriously and had a great presence there with the DOMB and with some members of council and with some merchants or business operators at large in the downtown. I believe the last meeting is this week or next week. It really was just to make sure that we were thinking of all the initiatives that we had to think of. Anyway, so forgive me for going on, but it's something that I've certainly spent a lot of time on the last little while. And I know the OPP have. I'm sure the inspector is waiting for the day where I don't pick up a phone and give her a call for a little while. But certainly something meaningful like the Community Mobilization Unit is something that will hopefully bring that result around. So I will now be quiet. I will go to Jay, and then I will go to Ralph. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Through the chair, just a couple of brief questions. I was curious. I was fortunate enough to be part of a briefing that I believe you had given a couple of weeks ago, and so I was able to ask some questions then. So I'll reiterate some of them, and some different questions too. I was curious. You had mentioned, I believe, kind of a relationship with the CMHA and working with them on this project. Just if you can expand a bit on that relationship and how that's worked and kind of how they've participated. The other question I was curious about, the quote there with from Sir Robert Peel, I think it's really interesting, looking at efficiency and trying to avoid the best way to do that is trying to avoid the crime in the first place. And so I was just curious if you could kind of speak to if there were any kind of community initiatives that that you're aware of elsewhere in other communities where the efforts put towards kind of trying to ensure that people kind of are that crimes are dealt with in different ways. So looking at drug addiction and how that's addressed. Are there alternatives to incarcerations or ways to prevent that? And then the other one being theft. Just if you could speak to either of those, it'd be really helpful. And thanks very much for your time. Great presentation.
Sergeant Stoner, yeah, a comment on the relationship with the CMHA and also initiatives that have beared fruit elsewhere, it sounds like. Thank you.
So the Canadian Mental Health Association received funding through partnership agencies or the provincial government. When they have that funding, I believe it started without me, and I might defer to the inspector, that they came to the OPP and helped create this program. It is to help get people into supports instead of putting them into prisons or charging them, arresting them, dealing with them through criminal activities. So it is to make sure that the people are supported instead of incarcerated. That's one thing, because a lot of them stem to a life of crime or those types of things because of the need or the lack of supports. With the recent expansion, the CMHA approached us and said that they had funding for an extra person. That funding is good till the end of this month. We're looking at hopefully perpetuating this program, but that'll be up to the CMHA to obtain that funding somehow and for them to raise it. I believe there's something similar in the works through Christine regarding a government grant and a potential position, but the CMHA will be looking towards partner agencies to get money to fulfill this position. And the person that we have right now, her name's Rachel. So she's here for another 4 weeks, but we have a permanent person that's been here by the name of Matt. He has been here over a year, and the work that him and Officer Kitchen have done proves that with the second person we can do even better work. So hopefully that answered your question.
So I'll just jump in on what Sergeant Stoner said. So typically, historically, before our coast partnership program started, we were going to the same address, dealing with the same individual and just repeated multiple calls. And we didn't really have an established partnership with the Canadian Mental Health Association. So what we did was we started doing some meetings and some discussions, and we based this program from other police agencies where it worked in the past. And so this program has actually been up and running for a few years. It started on a part-time basis, but the need was there to have it as a full-time program, actually in multiple jurisdictions because it worked so well. And so we finally got the funding. I think it was 2 years ago that it started full-time. And so Constable Kitchen now has a full-time partner from the Canadian Mental Health Association. So that's the history of it. So basically, by utilizing a Canadian mental health worker with an officer, from the officer's perspective, it reduces the stigma of police dealing with people with mental illness. Typically, in the past, when we would deal with them, it was as for an apprehension, and they didn't want to be apprehended. So by having us involved, it also shows the individuals in crisis that they're not necessarily going to get apprehended and taken to a place of safety. We can now, by having these contacts right there with us, get them immediately into the services that they need, and then our calls with that individual cease.
Thanks very much, guys.
Yeah, that's a great example of Councillor Follis's question of something occurring elsewhere that's been successful, and having those wrapper or those services that connect. Certainly, I mean, there's a short-term solution to an issue, and certainly a long-term. That sounds like a long meaningful term solution. Thank you. I believe I now have Ralph. Go ahead, Ralph.
Thank you very much, Mayor Clark. First of all, Sergeant Stoner, excellent presentation. One of the best I've heard in a long time. As you know, Mayor Clark, and I'm a strong supporter of the OPP, appointed by the province to the board, and a strong supporter of the DARE program. The questions I'm about to ask, I hope it doesn't offend anybody, but over the last 2 weeks, I've had 18 calls and emails between the two regarding our downtown and the problems we're having that. I guess my question is, do we have to hire our own security or off-duty police officers to patrol the downtown? And do we deduct that from our $8+ million contribution that we make? The I have two other questions, and one is maybe consider the use of drones within the downtown. I know you don't have all the officers you need to do the work, and the other thing is consideration of a satellite office in the downtown Orillia. So, like I said, I'm a really strong supporter of the OPP. I have a lot of friends now that are on the force, and also on the previously. So. Those are my questions for today, and you may want to consider using drones because we're one of the highest calls for service within the province, my understanding, within the OPP.
Well, Councillor, you've certainly asked a mouthful of questions. The first thing before the people who really know what they're doing jump in is if you've got 18 people calling you and they've identified issues, my first question to them is, did they reach out to the OPP? Did they report the issue? Because if they didn't, then you need to turn that right back around on them, because I mentioned the data collection earlier. That data isn't there, then the future deployment isn't going to be seen to be needed in that area. But anyway, I will let the inspector and the sergeant jump in on Councillor Sepula's questions. The second one was on drones, and the third one was on satellite office, which were, as you well know, Councillor, there was a motion by Council, and I know our staff, including our CAO, is working on that. And there is a grant opportunity that we may take advantage of that Sergeant Stoner alluded to bring in an additional social worker / mental health addictions person who very well may work with strongly with the OPP and have a presence, maybe even in the library. But that's where the discussion on any kind of satellite presence has been. Inspector, all yours.
Hi. So with regards to the question about the satellite office, I believe the mayor just answered that question. That's a discussion between the mayor and the OPP. And with regards to drone technology, currently that's not how they're utilized. They require an operator. I guess I'm not clear on what kind of a drone you're referring to, but we have what they call, it's an RPAS, and they're used for search and rescue and that sort of thing. We don't currently utilize them for enforcement.
What you may be thinking with drones, that might be more for the SCRAM program.
Sorry, there's about a 2 to 3 second delay when I tap my microphone before it reacts. Yes, Ralph, certainly the SCRAM program that I know you were very supportive of is really to put that eye in the sky in as many areas as we can where there may be any issues. So that would be certainly something that would hopefully negate the need of something like a drone. Okay, I've got Councillor Ted Emond.
Mr. Mayor, if I can, just another question, not a question, just a wrap up of my questions.
Okay, go. So that I can come back to you. Go ahead and wrap it up. And if you have another one, I'll put you back in queue. Go ahead.
Sergeant Stoner, I've been in business in downtown Orillia for almost 50 years, and we're still in business. And the last 4 years have seen more crimes, more problems within the downtown than I've ever seen before. So just a heads up for you, and thank you very much. Thank you very much for what you do. I know you're great. The OPP is a great contributor to our community, so thank you.
Thank you for that, Ralph. And now, Ted, this really is your turn. Whoops.
Thank you, Mayor Clark. And Sergeant Stoner, welcome back to Orillia. I'm sure it's only coincidence that you returned as Wave 1 just was taking off in Orillia and are not the cause of that. I brought it with you. I want to just comment first that in healthcare, we've come to realize that about half of the solution for the problems we have in creating a healthy community do not lie with the professional healthcare providers. They lie with the community and the various services that are available in the community. And I have a feeling that the same applies for the issues we're dealing with in our downtown, that we tend to focus on enforcement, we tend to focus on police presence because we see the crime, we see on the surface the behaviors that are causing the stress that Ralph and I and others are hearing from our downtown merchants. And so I just want to acknowledge that the program that you've laid out, I think, is a marvelous program and one that I'm anxious to see move forward as quickly as possible. The concern I have is that when you have a bit of an upturn in a difficult situation, if even maybe approaching some degree of crisis, regardless of whether it's created by the pandemic or contributed by the pandemic or not, it always seems to take a disproportionate amount of resource to turn that around than it does once you've turned it around to maintain it. So my question is there anything we can do as a community to ensure that in this particular stage, as you work over the next year to bring safety and security and a sense of confidence that people can return to our downtown, our visitors can be secure there. Is there anything we can do to help do that? That's the first question. My second question is the advice you give to merchants on how they can physically fix up, or the example of taking away the bench. Do you provide that service to our community on a holistic basis? I mean, we've redesigned, we've just come forward with a major redesign of our park system along the lakes. We're contemplating a major redesign of our downtown. Does that service work to provide the city with the more systemic infrastructure elements that we should be building into our design as we go forward?
Thanks, Ted. Yeah, certainly Sean Crawford, who was no stranger to the OPP, mentioned to me after hearing Sergeant Stoner at a roundtable, he was going to reach out just about maybe some design ideas in parking lots. So I would even extrapolate Ted's question on parking lots and other areas. So the first question was, what the heck can we do to assist you if that's not happening? And number two is on the SEPTED type advice.
So for the first question, the purpose of this unit is to help us get that turnaround and then allow the frontline officers that are already on patrol to
Anybody else
maintain
hear
it.
Sergeant Stoner? Because we cannot in the chamber. You guys can hear him.
Good.
Oh,
Can you hear me now?
yes, we can now. Yes, thank you.
Okay, so all I said was that the purpose of the community mobilization unit is to help get that turnaround, and then the whole detachment will work together to maintain it. So it's not just the 5 people that are gonna do the brunt of the labor. We still have the whole detachment. We still have a whole region, and we still have a whole province of assets to pull in to help us do that turnaround and then maintain it in the future. The purpose of this team, though, is to make sure that the community is engaged the whole time to maintain that, so that we're not just doing it by ourselves. We're not doing the heavy lifting alone, that we all are a team and that we contribute to our community safety. For number 2, as the mayor said, at one of the roundtables, I suggested that you have one of your people trained on SEPTED. So as your urban sprawl grows or as any other areas grow, there is somebody that can design these areas or housing complexes with crime prevention in mind. With us right now, we offer it to victims of crime, so they can turn it down if they like. As a proactive thing, we can have the auxiliaries do go out and do that if people ask for it. But it is mostly for crime prevention. So somebody who's already been affected by crime. If we do notice things and we are talking to people, we can mention it. These are just suggestions. They are not crime proofing. They will help do some elimination of crime, but it's not a total crime proofing. Hopefully that answered your questions.
Thank you, Sergeant. Thank you, Ted. I believe I have Patricia in queue. Go ahead, Pat.
Thanks, and thank you for your presentation. There was a lot of meat in it. Part of my questions were answered by Stephen Ralph, because I'm on the library board, so obviously the problems that we've had at the library were of concern of me. So I obviously would really like to see something happen with a substation or whatever in the library. And I think that Inspector Eaton, you partially addressed that. I think if it was a drop-in, if there were people there, that might help. And perhaps Inspector Eaton, you could speak to that a little bit. My thought was, even if there was an officer that was doing doing checks that there, so it could be manned the whole time. So someone who was on light duties, that might help, and then people would feel safe going into the library. Could you speak to that a little bit, please? I should have given you warning.
So again, oh no, that's fine. So again, that's a discussion that would likely have to happen offline between the city and the detachment here. I can tell you that it wouldn't be a member on light duties that would be down there, because it affects a person's, it's an individual thing, persons on modified duties. So certainly it would have to be, that wouldn't be an option for us at this point, depending on what the members' accommodation was. So, and again, like I said, we could have further discussions with the city at that point, depending on what they wanted to fund for an office.
And also, about 2.5 years ago, we did a whole session with the OPP and with Matthew, with the downtown management board, where we really tried to put it out to any member of the management board about safety planning, training, and we talked about SEPTED, and at that point it was suggested that any of them could come forward and have that whole training done. And I don't think any of them ever did take it up on it, because I know it's a wonderful program. Matthew, you don't know, but I used to do the victim services program, so I was very much aware of that whole program. And I think it's a great little program, and any merchant would be really wise to find out more about it, because making your premises safer is always a good thing. And even if they hadn't been broken into, the program was being offered to them at that point, so that they could make sure that their program was a safe one. And I don't know if that option is still open to them, but it really would be a bit beneficial. And of course, the whole Scram program, is going to be a great program if people just can pick up on it, and then it makes the whole downtown safer. Because I agree with Ralph, the downtown does not seem as safe as it used to. Every time I go down, I am accosted by somebody asking me for money, and my normal response is to send them to the lighthouse where they can get help.
Thanks for that, Pat. I think you maybe also just add a little an answer to Ted's question on what the community can do, and that's have some of these folks reach out on some of the programs the OPP do offer. Sergeant, do you have anything to add sorry, David, for Councillor Heath?
So we don't do the training. We train our officers or the auxiliaries to come out and do the consulting. But if you're looking to have members of the community trained, there are private education facilities that will host those. And I think a lot of it is done online now.
Great, thank you. Anybody else? Well, listen, it's obviously a significant issue. Almost an hour on for a deputation and Q&A is very unusual. But all that to say, thank you very, very much for your time. sergeant and inspector, and please reach out anytime for if there's anything that we can do that occurs to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, with respect to the minutes from February 2021 Special Council, Township of Ramiro Minister Zoning Order, February 2021 Regular Council Meeting, February 19th, 2021 Special Council Meeting regarding education and training session, implementation of a place to grow growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe. Is there somebody willing to put that on the table? Thank you to have it accepted. Thank you, David, and thank you, Rob. Any questions, comments, discussion? All in favor? Thank you. That's carried. Nothing under correspondence today, but we do have one report with 5 different clauses. Again, for those watching at home, this is dealt with something like consent agenda. There's a number of items that are going to occur under one motion. And the reason for that under reports is these are all items that came to council committee last Monday, and they're on the table tonight to be formally brought into legislation. And so because they've already been debated and discussed, they will all fall under, the 5 clauses will fall under one report, unless there's a desire by a member of council to pull one for a potential change of direction. And Madam Deputy Clerk, are we aware of any such items?
No, Mayor Clark, not at this time.
Thank you very much. Then I will ask for a motion to be put on the screen. Sorry, Councillor Ralph, do you want to have an item pulled for a potential change?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you.
Sorry, go ahead.
First, item number 5, I'd like to pull that for a recorded vote. And I'd like to talk on item number 2.
And sorry, number 5 for a recorded vote, and number 2 for to speak to? You're on mute, but I think I read.
Just want to ask a question on number 2.
Let's go. Oh, there it is right there.
Yes.
Can you please put that back on the screen if you don't mind, Robin? Thank you. I think I was talking into a muted microphone. That report number 2021-3 of Council Committee now before Council be adopted with the exception of Clause 5, which shall be introduced separately. Is there a mover and a shaker to that on the floor? Thank you, David. Thank you, Ted. Discussion on any of the other first four items. Ralph, you want to speak to number 2? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item number 2 says that we're going to do a 10-year implementation plan. It's through you to our CAO or whoever wants to answer this. Is 10 years too long? I think it's really important. The presentation that was made to us is really important that we deal with a lot sooner rather than later. So is this a 10-year plan too long to implement? I think it needs to be implemented a lot quicker.
CAO, we're going to bring you into the...
Through you, Mr. Mayor. No, I don't believe it is too long. What staff are being directed to do in this particular case, Mr. Mayor, is to initiate the steps to prepare the 10-year plan. And consequently, you will see through your budget discussions in 2022, certainly items that will be recommended to move forward. As you're well aware, through the presentation last week, there have been already several items that we've moved forward with. So at this point, I do not believe that the 10-year is something that is to be concerned about. I think that you will see certainly some actions very clearly in 2022.
Thank you.
That's 3.5 hours. Can everybody hear me now? Okay. Okay, great. Thank you. Any further questions, comments on the first 4 items in the report number 1? In that case, I will call the question. All in favor? That is carried, and thank you very much. So Tim, you're bragging and showing off of having 2 requests to speak signs, but you don't have a vote sign. I'm yanking your chain. Okay. Now on to clause 5 of report number 1, which is the only report in this category tonight. That clause 5 of report number 2020-3 of Council Committee now before Council be adopted. This is with respect to the establishment of a climate change reserve. And I will now ask for a mover and a seconder to put this on the floor. Moved by Jay and seconded by Mason. And Ralph, you wish to speak, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Climate change is important to us, but I think with the with this COVID-19, we have a staff that's really busy, and we can use all the funds, all the money to help our citizens get over this COVID, and by us putting a reserve. The other question that I might have is the provincial and federal government haven't come to the table on it yet, and I think Mr. Trudeau has announced that they're going to have some kind of a climate change policy coming up fairly soon. So I'm wondering, before we pass this, if we can table it or have a recorded vote the way you want to have it until we get the input from the federal and provincial governments to that, because they are going to be funds. I chatted with a person at Queen's Park, and they said there will be funds available to make climate change an important factor within society and within our communities.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Ralph. The only thing I would say from the chair is that this proposed motion is to ask for just a report on the feasibility of establishing a climate change reserve. Certainly, at some point, if you're going to establish a reserve, you want to populate it with some resources, but this doesn't even contemplate that. So that particular decision on if and how much or how much resources will go into this is a subsequent decision. So I don't believe your question around funding is relevant to this particular decision, but certainly it very well could be subsequently. Anybody else wish to weigh in on that? Okay. Mason, I have you in queue, and then Pat, and then Tim, and then Ted.
Yes, through you, Mayor Clark, happy to support this moving forward. It's just logical to create a reserve. And just to be quite clear for members of council, I know for myself, this is, our 6th year being on council, and for, some more members, this is our 2nd year rolling into our 3rd. The budget process is fairly straightforward and fairly simple, and both members of this council and the past council have made multiple different reserves in the past. The process of creating a reserve does not mean that there's any money in it. We've made numerous reserves where essentially you just put a name on a sheet and it says, this is the reserve. That doesn't mean that there's going to be any money that gets put into that reserve. That's a completely different conversation. This motion is asking to put a little title in the budget so that we have established a reserve. That doesn't mean that any funds are going to go into this. It just allows that conversation to happen. Thank you.
And thank you for that, Patricia.
Thank you. The key word here is feasibility. And so we're looking at the feasibility of establishing a reserve. And I'll never block anything that says feasibility. We're looking at the possibility of doing it. So I'm quite prepared to go forward.
Thank you very much, and thanks for allowing Councillor Lau and I to play charades. He doesn't wish to speak anymore, and I'll go to Ted.
Thank you, Mayor Clark. Just a very simple point in response to my colleague indicating that maybe provincial or federal monies might be available. We know from past experience that those communities that have a plan and are ready to move forward and also have funding set aside for the municipal share typically are looked at more favorably than those communities that don't. So we're putting a climate change plan together. This will give us the opportunity over a period of time to put some funding available so that when senior levels of government do in fact announce their programs, we will be in a position to take advantage of those where we might not be if we just sat back and waited. So I'm in favor of moving forward with studying and getting it to our next budget.
Are you calling that a shovel-ready plan?
A shovel ready, yes, that would be it. Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
All right, thank you. I don't see anybody else in queue. I don't see any other hands in the air. I believe it was a request for a recorded vote, so I'll ask our more than capable staff to set that process up, please.
Thank you, Mayor Clark. A recorded vote has been requested. When I call your name, if you could please indicate your vote by saying yes or no. I will start with Councillor Lauer.
Yes.
Councillor Klustra.
Yes.
Councillor Campbell.
Yes.
Councillor Sepola.
No.
Councillor Heen.
Yes.
Councillor Fallis.
Yes.
Councillor Emond.
Yes.
Councillor Ainsworth.
Yes.
Mayor Clark.
Absolutely.
Mayor Clark, there are 8 yeas, 1 nay. The motion is carried.
Okay, thank you again for that. We are now on to motions. We have no notice of motion, no deputation motions, no consent agenda. We are into bylaws, and I understand that one is to be pulled, correct? And that is bylaw number 2020-22. It's been asked to be pulled to be voted on separately, I believe, by Councillor Fallis. So if I can see a motion to capture the rest of the bylaws, we'll do that first, and then we'll go to 2021-22. I'm sorry, Ralph, I saw an upside down yes sign. I'm not sure what you're asking for that. So is that you're moving the motions or moving the bylaws?
No, I just motion that I'll move for the bylaws.
Oh, okay, all right, thank you. I'll put them on the screen, I'll read them, then I will ask for a seconder because I already have it over. Thank you very much. That the following bylaws be enacted, 2021-20. Bossy pants. All right. All right. I do apologize for my slow microphone. That's the first time I've seen this particular issue. Anyway, the following bylaws being enacted, 2021-20, a bylaw to appoint a deputy treasurer for the city of Orillia, Angela Anderson. 2021-21, a bylaw to amend chapter 210 of the city of Orillia Municipal Code tax collector. 2021-23, a bylaw to amend bylaw number 2020-28, excuse me, of the city of Orillia COVID-19 emergency measures bylaw. And 2021-24, a bylaw to amend chapter 385 of the city of Orillia Municipal Code emergency response plan that we saw last week. And I have a mover, and Ralph, is there a seconder? That would be so kind to set up. Thank you, Councillor Pat. And any discussion on those bylaws? Councillor Tim and then Councillor Ted.
Thanks, Mayor Clark. I think it was 23, the one dealing with square footage. Is that necessary given that we're back into a gray, or am I missing something there?
My understanding is it is necessary, unless it's the will of council to maintain that for when we go back into red, because this bylaw didn't die on the table when we came out of red, when we went back into red a few weeks ago. When we first came out of red on December 25th or 26th, and it was potentially could have been reenacted when we went back into red. So this is to now take it off the table and rely on the health departments for their capacity legislation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor, I'm sorry, go ahead, Ted.
Thank you, Mayor Clark. I was just wondering when we might have an opportunity as council to meet our new deputy treasurer.
I will refer or defer or look over to our CIO for that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I will ensure that she is invited to our next council committee meeting so that we can introduce her.
Go ahead, Ralph. All yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Number 22, bylaw number 22 there. I'm just wondering if I can just make a comment. I know there's been a lot of work performed, a lot of time and effort was put on by Mr. Landry and Mr. Kronk to make this happen. Outside of the hydro, this is one of the biggest land sales there has been. So it's great to see that a local company will grow into this.
Sorry, Ralph. Sorry about that. I could not get my microphone to turn back on. That item is not in these bylaws. And that has been pulled, and we'll be dealing with that subsequent to passing of these bylaws. So
Okay, then I'll speak on it then. Thank you.
Don't turn your mic off.
Okay, sorry, any further discussion or debate on those first bylaws? Moved by Ralph and seconded by Pat. I will now call the question. All in favor? Thank you. Let me leave my microphone on. Okay, as promised, Councillor Sapola, we got another one that you were interested in and Councillor Falls is interested in. I will read it, then I will ask for a mover and a seconder, then I'll entertain discussion that bylaw number 2021-22, a bylaw to confirm the sale of 200 Valley Road to 5006426 Ontario Inc. be enacted. Is there a mover and a shaker? Thank you, Pat. Thank you, Rob. I will entertain discussion. Councillor Cipolla.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to reach out because I know how much work has been done on this particular project, and to have a local entrepreneur, this property creates work, creates jobs in this. Sorry. Can't hear you. So I just. Can I continue?
Can we, if you're not touching, I'm not touching it. Sorry, something is really going on with my audio system. Yeah, Councillor, I just want to remind you, not all the information around that potential sale is public information. So there's a little sensitivity there until it becomes public, that's all. So carry on with your comments.
Okay, then in that case, I just want to throw out a thanks to Mr. Gronk and Mr. Landry for their efforts, and the senior staff that worked on this as well. It was a project that was well done, and I think it'll bring a lot of benefits to our community. So I just want to recognize the work that they did, and it is well served for the community. So those two gentlemen need a lot of thanks.
I appreciate that very much. I'm sure we'll pass on your comments. Thanks for that. And Councillor Fowles, Jake, go ahead.
Thanks. Just a quick comment. I pulled it because I think it's an asset for the city, and you know, it's easy to get rid of now, and then a couple years down the line, we find out that it's a valuable resource that we could have used. So that's just my feelings on it, and so I just wanted the opportunity to vote against. Thanks.
Thank you very much for that. Any further questions or comments? I will now call the question. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. And Madam Deputy Clerk, I've been doing this just long enough to understand that there's normally a confirming bylaw. Can't get one by the mayor. And here it is right here, that the bylaw number 2020-25, a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council at its meeting held this very day, March 1st, if you can believe it, 2021 be enacted. A mover and a seconder. Thank you, David. Thank you, Ted. Any discussion on the confirming bylaw? I'll call the question. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you very much for that. Announcements. All right. And Madam Deputy Clerk, are we aware of anybody in queue for open public forum? All right. Well, thank you, Council. Some good discussion, particularly around the OPP presentation. Thank you very much for that. Glad to see everybody, even if it's virtual. And I will now entertain a motion to adjourn. Thank you, Mason. That's the Mason I know right there. Is there a seconder to adjourn? Thank you, Jay. All in favor? That's great. Thank you. Have a great night.
Thanks,
Stay safe, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.